Your bill in here, not in the hallway.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I was stopped by one of our esteemed members that's been around this chamber for a long time.
All right, hang on just a second. All right, we're gonna go ahead and, chair's discretion, we're gonna make a little change to the agenda. We're gonna take off, House Bill 147, for right now. And so we're gonna be hearing House Bill 124 and House Bill 354, today is not, that's all we're gonna be hearing. So whenever you're ready, Representative Williams. The whole crowd's leaving.
Y'all don't want to hear about my subject matter?
All right.
Yeah, I left some of my graphics in my office in such a hurry to get here. So I was talking with the State Board of Funeral Service, and they told me they really don't have a problem with this bill. They knew it came up last year and didn't get out of committee, and they knew we would be bringing it back again.
Representative, which bill?
This is 127, alkaline hydrolysis.
Okay, and what LC number are you working
LC number, wait a minute, is it 124?
on? Okay,
LC 364518.
all right.
Okay. This bill we presented last year and got hung up a little bit. But as you know, there's several different ways for cremation. Cremation can be done by fire for heat in a regular crematory, or it can be done by alkaline hydrolysis. Now, alkaline hydrolysis is a way that's done that's, it lowers the carbon footprint, and people might have an aversion to flame or fire. This process also reduces airborne pollutants and other personal preference. I had some pictures in my office, I'll be glad to run back and get them, of one funeral home that had smoke billowing out of the top of it, and it was not being operated properly. Have another picture of a funeral home down in Augusta, Georgia that burnt to the ground last year because it was a gas-fired crematory, and it was malfunctioned, was not operated correctly. But if you don't operate the alkaline hydrolysis correctly, nothing happens. There's no danger of that taking place. Alkaline hydrolysis has been used for over 28 years for the sterilization and disposition of animal carcasses or remains, especially even through the University of Georgia, that are veterinary clinics. So if it's good enough for UGA, it's good enough for us. The Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota has employed this process since 2006. And it's done for taking care of cremating the remains of anatomical specimens and that type stuff. It's also the preferred method of sterilization for pathogenic biological waste, deceased bodies and tissues. And the other thing, and I know Chairman Hawkins would understand, the mercury and the amalgam of the dental fillings are not released into the atmosphere. They're all stay into this vat that after the alkaline hydrolysis has taken place. So I'll be glad to answer any questions if anybody has any questions.
Oh, great, we have a question. Okay, who's number 17? All right, Chairman Hawkins.
Remember this last year. Wouldn't this be more correctly termed either cremation or melting? Isn't this more of a melting process?
Well, the results is the same, and what it does is speeds up the decomposition of the remains.
Right.
But under the State Board of Funeral Service, I don't know that you know, we could get by with, you know, they've got to be licensed.
Right.
These containers are going to be licensed by the
Right.
state board, and so they're going to be licensed as a crematory or funeral home. And
So-
they still fit under the category of cremation. It's just flameless cremation.
Right. So the end result is it will provide more opportunities for a type of cremation within, closer to communities and cities, because you're not producing a smoke or a hazardous gas, I assume?
That is correct. I think it's illegal now in Georgia to have a gas-fired crematory within 100 feet of a residential neighborhood. So actually, you know, my crematory in Milledgeville is in the city limits, and it's within about 75 feet of houses. But it was grandfathered in. But yeah, what you have is there's no, and this is what's happened in some cities in Georgia. They have actually said we will not allow a crematory in our city limits, and it's from people from close proximity, and so they've decided not to do that. So this would solve that problem.
Right.
Also, the effluent that is discharged from the alkaline hydrolysis is so alkaline, and it's a good bit of water that goes into the water treatment treatment plant, that it actually is helping them neutralize the waste that goes in these water treatment plants.
Okay,
This
got-
goes into the sewer system of the?
Yes, sir, it does. Just like waste from our embalming room, which formaldehyde that we use, which is a cancer-causing agent, known cancer-causing agent, goes through the same water treatment system too.
Okay, got another question for you. Representative Washburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, thank you for bringing this bill again. I remember it well last year. Is there a cost difference between cremation by fire and this process? Is that not considered in any way? I mean, does it matter? It doesn't matter about the appropriateness of it, but I was just curious if the consumer benefits at all by this over fire.
Basically, this equipment is a little more expensive. We're pricing to add another crematory to our facility, and they run anywhere from $125,000 to $185,000, and it would be in about the same price range as that equipment. But as far as the operational, this is much safer. It's it can be a preferred method. You know, it's not whether or not you go in a Ford, Chevrolet, or Plymouth. It's where you want to go through a regular gasoline automobile or electric car. You know, take your pick. As far as retail pricing to the consumer, I think everyone's pricing is about the same. You'll see some people that will advertise direct cremation $8.95, and then you'll see some that it's up to $3,000, and a lot of them are using the same equipment. So what it will mean to the consumer not necessarily will be more or less, but it will be a choice of what they wish.
Mr. Chairman, one more.
Go ahead.
Is this being used extensively in other states? I assume it is.
Yes, sir, it is. It's in quite a number of other states all around us. North Carolina has it. Florida has some. Alabama. In Alabama, they licensed it in 2017. California in 2017. Colorado 2011. Florida 2010. Idaho 2013. Illinois 2012. So, I mean, it's just a number of states that this is licensed in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Earhart.
I'm just kind of curious about this technology because I find it kind of fascinating. Is this sort of cremation technology used in other states?
I didn't understand your question.
In other words, this process, is this currently used in other states?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, it's,
That's why he was,
yeah, that's what I was just going
that's what
over.
you were- okay.
Alabama, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Florida, Idaho, Illinois, Kansas, Maine, Maryland, Minnesota, Missouri, Nevada, North Carolina, Oregon, Utah, Vermont, Washington State. And by the way, Washington State has now licensed cadaver composting. So we don't want to go there,
Understood.
but that's something totally different. So you can see how things are changing. But that actually became legal in Washington State this year.
Right. So in addition to be, Mr. Chairman, if I may, so in addition to being a viable alternative to places, situations where fire might be a hazard or an issue, it also provides a level of customer options, as you were saying.
It does, and you know, I've heard it described as giving, like placing mother
Yeah.
in a warm bath.
Right.
You're placing them in a container, and it's warm water. The unit is locked. The questions have come up about how about the equipment? What if something happens to it? How are you trained to handle it? Well, there again, there's a hotline. You pick up a phone and you call, just like you do with the gas crematory. We've had issues with ours, wouldn't start something. We pick up the phone, call them. They hook up to it with a computer and tell us to replace a thermocouple. So all of these crematory companies have 24-hour, 7-day-a-week access.
Thank you.
okay. All right. If there's any other questions, I'll entertain a motion at this time.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, I move for that we pass it out to subcommittee with a do pass
All right. So
recommendation.
I got a motion to have a second. All right, then. Have your bill.
Thank you very much.
Me? Oh, hang on a minute. Those, yeah. So, got a second. So all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Like sign. Okay. Now you have your bill.
Thank you very much,
Getting a little rusty on this stuff.
subcommittee.
All right. So now we'll move on to House Bill 354. Representative Williams again.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. I bring before you a bill that, even though I'm in the business, is something that's needed. We have had here in Georgia countless funeral homes, cemeteries, people to steal people's money. The most recent, some of you may have seen it from Channel 13 or Fox 5 here in Atlanta, where a funeral home owner also owned a cemetery. This funeral home owner was selling pre-need funerals and not escrowing the money as required by the state of Georgia. What they were doing, they were spending it as it came in. The State Board of Funeral Service, I don't think ever got a complaint. What happened is the State Board of Cemeterians oversee pre-need funerals and cemeteries. This particular funeral home quit renewing their cemetery license in 2005. So the State Board of Cemeterians allowed this funeral director cemeterian to operate for 20 years with no license. Now, if you didn't renew your dental license, they would come knocking on your door before a month was out. But the State Board of Cemeterians failed in their duty to, number one, to regulate their own industry that they're charged with overseeing and regulating. Number two, they failed the public by not going and confronting the problem and getting it solved. They allowed this funeral director to continue operating, and he wound up stealing over $250,000 of pre-need funeral money, and he stole probably about that much in perpetual care money from his cemetery. The cemetery is now in receivership through the Secretary of State's office. I have worked with Secretary of State. Used to, cemeteries were under the Secretary of State Securities Division, and they got moved from there to the State Board of Cemeterians, and all they did, and they admitted under oath and in testimony when we held hearings just year before last, that they got the reports and stuck them in a drawer, that they had nobody to review them. Well, now that's changed. Thanks to Secretary Raffensperger, it's back to the Securities Division. Nulia Zaharis is over that division, and they are cleaning up cemeteries and the pre-need funeral business. This bill, because there's another situation in South Georgia, a funeral home was just fined by the State Board of Funeral Service for 45 counts of forgery. This funeral director or funeral home owner didn't have a funeral director. So she has waited on families, which is illegal, sold funeral goods, which is illegal, under the guise of a funeral director that has signed the contract and the death certificate, but the funeral directors were never employed by that funeral home. Those funeral directors have testified under oath that they did not sign contracts. They did not wait on those families, that their signatures were forged. When I found out and was made aware of it, then I had contacted the sheriff in that local jurisdiction and told him what I had heard happening, and it was going to be a repeat of what happened in Jones County. By the way, going back to Jones County, he's now serving prison time in Jackson, Georgia. He got a 20-year sentence, due 5. Anyway, this other funeral home in this other town was waiting on families and committing this forgery. And when I notified the sheriff reached out to the State Board of Funeral Service. They wouldn't tell him anything. Took him 3 months after he reached out to them before they finally meet once a month, and they finally voted, okay, we'll turn information over to him. Well, how many more families have been wronged? How many more forgeries have occurred? And how much more money has been stolen or people damaged? What this bill does and what this bill says, very simple. Upon investigation that show there may be violations of state or federal criminal law, and within 7 days, they will notify the sheriff in the county in which something is taking place, and the sheriff can notify the district attorney in that locality, so they can start looking into it to stop, and I mean stop, illegal practices. You know, I just got off the telephone with the director of the State Board of Funeral Service, and he and I both agreed things need to happen. We can't protect the profession. We've got to protect the public. And that's what this bill is after, is to protect those people. Because it goes back to the Bridges incident where people had paid for their funerals, written checks for $12,000, $15,000. They don't have that money anymore. There's no money there. Any of you can go back and Google Randy Travis, Fox 5, and you can watch the whole thing that he has done on that. I'll be glad to answer any questions at this time.
Now, Representative, I think it was in mid-2000s, they changed it where the funeral homes don't handle the money. They have to take out an insurance policy now.
No, they can still handle the money.
Oh, they can still?
Yes, sir. They can still handle the money, and there's no oversight on that, and that's the next thing we've got to fix.
Okay.
There, you know, people can walk in a funeral home, make pre-arrangements, and just because a funeral home is licensed to do funeral business, they're also licensed to sell pre-need funerals. I don't think they should be. I think they need to be licensed for that. They need to be bonded. They need to be fingerprinted and about background check. And that's what I'll be working on next.
Okay, got a question for you here, Representative Smith.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, did you push your button?
Okay.
All right, nope, just push it once. There you go, hang on.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Chairman, for bringing this issue before us. Have you been working with the Attorney General's office on this legislation?
Yes, sir. We have talked to the Attorney General's office, and they're so snowed under. Getting them to make something happen, handling it in the locality, they don't have any objection to it. They were in on the Gray, Georgia matter, and it kept going and kept going. Our local district attorney in the Okmulgee circuit actually prosecuted that case and brought the charges, and because it had taken the Attorney General's office over a year, and they still had not brought any charges. So the only way to get something quick to happen is to get our local district attorney involved, because it's dealing with his local constituents.
Can you help me out with that
Yes, sir.
follow-up, Mr. Chairman? Can you help me out as far as like the process? Is the district attorney contacted first, or does someone have to contact the Attorney General's office and then the Attorney General contacts the district attorney?
They can contact the local district attorney, and the Attorney General has no problem at all with that. Matter of fact, they're good with it because they work hand in hand. So what happens, they would notify whether it be the sheriff's department or whether it be the police department. And if they start looking and they see there is in fact forgery or criminal activity taking place, that's when they reach out to the district attorney, prosecuting attorney, and then they start investigations, and it can move quicker. Where the State Board of Funeral Service only has about 4 inspectors, investigators, they're inspecting, investigating all over the state of Georgia. What happens when you get that local law enforcement agency involved, they work on it every day, not once a month or once every 4 or 5 weeks. Thank you for your question. I
Thank
hope
you.
I answered it.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Next question, Chairman Martin.
You got a button on top.
All right, there you go. Representative, I think I want to follow along the same lines. I think Representative Smith was going. But what you call for on line 16, the bill, is notification to the Attorney General's office and the sheriff. Wouldn't you be meaning the local district attorney's office and
Yes.
the sheriff?
Yes.
That I believe is what Representative Smith was saying. We're calling for him to notify the AG, which might in fact have the case of slowing it down, because then it says they have 7 more days to get in touch with the local. So that I believe was what the representative was talking about. We might need to change that first notification to be the district attorney. I know Sean Marie, Miss Story was there.
Did you see that, Sean Marie?
I'm several semesters shy of a law degree, so I'm not sure exactly how that goes, but
I think the way this is written, it would put the onus on the board to notify the AG's office, as well as notify the sheriff's office. But the AG's office would then decide who would be appropriate, because they have attorneys there, which prosecutor might be appropriate to prosecute. But in the meantime, the board would have already notified the sheriff in the location in which they're believed to be criminal activity.
that makes sense. And then, because she said, not in the mic, I'm going to repeat what she said, that you notify the sheriff's office and the AG's office, so the AG would decide the proper venue for the prosecution. I guess my question is, if you notify the sheriff's office and they start investigating and it's a crime, don't they have a standard process that when they get evidence of a crime, they go to
Their district attorney.
wherever they are to do, I just raised that. If it seems that if you're gonna notify the Attorney General's office, you don't have to count on them to then choose a prosecutor, but I stand down and to the,
Could potentially be a federal violation as
there you
well.
go.
And so you might want to have someone, you know, with that legal background that was looking at it. It would also be somebody that could then be aware of, whereas the locals are only gonna know what they're notified of. If you notify the AG's office, they'll know about multiple violations by the same bad actors potentially.
Okay, so just, if I may, Mr. Chairman, just to clear that, what you said, the multiple notification here is to start a dual path potential for like a RICO, racketeering, whatever, if it's happening in multiple jurisdictions. But identifying or notifying the Attorney General's office and the Sheriff's office at the same time doesn't preclude the Sheriff's office from going through the normal investigative process and notifying his district attorney right away for low, state charges, and then the district attorney may come riding in with more? Is
What
that
happens
what
is-
that's to do?
Do you want me to answer? The way, I'm not saying that someone on the local level couldn't use this bill as an excuse not to do what they're tasked with doing. The way I read this bill is it's only governing what the board's obligations are and the AG's obligations are. And the board obligation is to report to the sheriff as well as the AG's office, like that dual path. So if one breaks down, the AG's office is busy, you still have someone on the ground that it could be something that needed to be immediately addressed, which is why I think the sponsor of this bill chose to go with the sheriff's office over a prosecuting attorneys first, because they may need to actually go out and take action that day. And then the AG's office said there would be a central location where somebody is knowledgeable about everything that's being reported. And they could also, maybe there needs to be multiple jurisdictions that the board didn't recognize the appropriate jurisdiction, so it's kind of like a fail-safe. So it may be somewhat duplicative, but it's not meant, as I understand it, it's not meant to relieve any member of law enforcement or the AG's office from any obligation that they currently have under law.
Last follow-up, if I may, Mr. Chairman, and I'll stand down on this, but I just worry about on line 18 where it says the AG shall have 7 days to provide the proper prosecuting attorney. If in the meantime, they have 7 days to pick a prosecuting attorney, if in the meantime the sheriff's investigated and there's no there, it seems like we're multi-pathing, but again, not a lawyer.
The sheriff has already been notified,
I
and
understand.
so the sheriff can start investigation immediately. What this is saying, upon receiving notification, the AG shall, within 7 days, provide the appropriate prosecuting attorney within his jurisdiction. But the sheriff has already been notified, so the sheriff is probably already investigating.
That's my point. The sheriff knows who his
Right.
prosecuting attorney is. It seems like we're putting something in the AG's door that.
Well, the AG, for clarification, the state boards, funeral directors, cemeterians, they have a representative from the AG's office at their board meetings anyway. So when they become aware, they're aware. But the process now, they've gotten a report that some forgery is taking place. They meet once a month. State Board of Cemeterians hasn't even met this in the past year, one time. So they're not actually meeting. So if something gets reported and it looks like forgery or fraud, illegal activities, the executive director, with the direction of the State Board of Cemeterian, can go ahead and notify the sheriff in that locality rather than trying to call a meeting of the State Board of Cemeterians, and it may be a month or 2 months before they even get around to meeting. So this is getting somebody to wake up, something's happening, let's protect the public, let's stop it before it gets out of hand.
Okay. All right, we've got to move on to another question. Chairman Hawkins.
Actually, I was just gonna speak to the process because the state boards are provided, counsel through the Attorney General's office. So whenever a state board is posed with a problem, it is reported by that attorney to the Attorney General's office. And to what Representative here is speaking to, there is the ability of that board also to contact local to move a case exponentially. We've had those problems in dental and medical situations where the legal process can be lengthy, but it is needed. The Attorney General supplies that attorney to the board, but at the same time, an action can be taken on a local level. I think that's what Sean Marie was saying. I had a little trouble hearing her behind the column, but this is a good bill. I mean, it's just another fail-safe and actually expediting problems that's needed on the ground in these communities. Yeah.
Yeah, where it might differ from the dental, you know, they might be something going on with a dentist, but here again, we're talking about people walking in, making prearrangements, writing a check for both parents of $30,000. You know, so some people can lose a lot of money rather quickly. So that's what this bill is intended. Thank you.
Got one more question. Who's number 3? There, Mr. Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Williams, I like the bill, but my 2 questions: why 7 days? Should it be less than, more than? And then number 2, when should the public be informed? Because I remember the case that you're highlighting, and it was just atrocious that it has gone on that long. And when you think about the number of deaths that are occurring every day, not because of the pandemic, but just people are dying. You're in that business. And the reason why I'm asking about when should the public be informed, because what if a family member go to that funeral because their loved one just transitioned? What kind of recourse do they have if a situation like this took 7 days and they were not informed, or the public was not informed?
I understand, and thank you for that question, Representative. I'm not sure why. Sean Marie, can you address the 7 days?
So potentially you could put whatever time period you wanted in there. You could say immediately, something like that, but then that, you know, immediately, sort of like when y'all request bills for me, can mean different things at different times, right? So 7 days just seemed, I think, we were thinking that 7 days would give you, you know, a week. Hopefully you'll do it sooner than that, but depending on what else you have going on, and no event should it be beyond a week. So it doesn't eliminate someone from picking up the phone immediately, but it's saying beyond 7 days, you've now done something outside of the purview of this bill. So it doesn't prohibit anyone from doing it, like within a few minutes of knowing, but it gives an outward range that could be shortened.
If I could go back to that Bridges situation. That started occurring, and the way it occurred, he had his building foreclosed on him by a bank. A local investor went and bought his building from the bank and then leased it back to him. Well, that should have been a flag. All along now, 10 years ago, he had let his license lapse for the cemetery. And the State Board of Cemeterians, you can look at their minutes, and almost monthly they talked about this issue with the problem they were having of this cemetery in Gray, Georgia. Well, they knew, you know, and like Dan Rather said, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's got to be a duck. Well, they knew there was a crook, but they wasn't doing nothing. And they allowed it to fester. The sheriff wasn't aware until this guy was kicked out of the building he was renting for not paying rent. And so when that happened, he couldn't operate his funeral home anymore. So the people that took over the funeral home all of a sudden their phone started ringing. We have prepaid funeral arrangements there with this guy. Well, there's no record of anything, so they went to every bank in town. There was no accounts in any bank. And so you can't just all of a sudden go and say, you know, this man has done this stuff without due process. So that's when the local sheriff met with all of these families and found out, wow, we got a situation. And the sheriff kept pushing the AG's office here in Atlanta to do something. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? It wasn't nothing happened. He was indicted just a few days after all of this came up, because we have a great judicial system there in the Okmulgee district. I mean, we have a great group of judges and district attorney, and they're pretty proactive. So that's what happened, and got to the bottom of that. But I understand how quickly, and that's one reason for getting the local sheriff involved. If we can get that local sheriff involved, we can get word to the local community quicker. We can get investigation done quicker. We can make things happen quicker. That's the purpose of the bill. Thank you for the question.
All right. Is there any other questions at this moment? Okay, what's the will of the committee? Okay, got a first, I got a move and a second. All right, all in favor say aye. Any opposed, like sign? All right, you got your bill.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you, committee.
Since, like I said, House Bill 147 has been taken off, that does it for today, and we'll adjourn. Thank y'all for all coming.